I never liked Lena. From the moment I met her, I knew she wanted my husband. She wasn't the kind of woman who cared about boundaries, and Eric, my husband, was too trusting to see it. She would laugh a little too hard at his jokes, touch his arm a little too often, and find excuses to call him outside of work hours. I saw all the signs, but Eric? He dismissed them all. Angela, you're overthinking, he would say, his voice full of reassurance. Lena is just my colleague, that's all. I wanted to believe him. God knows I did. But something in me refused to accept it. Maybe it was the way she looked at him, like he was a prize she was waiting to claim. Maybe it was how she conveniently needed his help more than anyone else in their office. Or maybe it was just my own insecurities gnawing at me. Whatever it was, I could not shake the feeling that Lena was a problem waiting to happen. Lena had started working at the company a year after Eric. She was smart, ambitious, and highly competent in her role. She had a way of making herself indispensable, a skill that earned her both admiration and resentment among her colleagues. But what unsettled me most was how she attached herself to Eric from the very beginning. They worked in the same department, handling high-profile client accounts, which required them to collaborate closely. Late-night emails, brainstorming sessions, and urgent calls became a routine part of their dynamic. Eric would come home talking about how Lena and I handled the issue, or Lena had this great idea for the project. And every time, I felt a pit form in my stomach. She was always there, always involved, always finding a reason to reach out to him. And the worst part? Eric never seemed to mind. I had met Lena in person a few times. She was beautiful, confident, and effortlessly charming. When she spoke to Eric, she leaned in too close. When she laughed at his jokes, she would place her hand on his arm, letting it linger just a second too long. I would watch, my stomach twisting in knots, as she looked at him with an intensity that made my skin crawl. I confronted Eric about it more than once. She touches you too much. Why does she always have to call you at night? I asked him one evening. It's work, Angela. We're handling important clients. Sometimes things come up last minute, he responded, exasperated. But why is it always her? Doesn't anyone else call you? He sighed. She's my project partner. The company assigned us to work together. I don't control that. That was always his excuse, that it wasn't his choice, that Lena was just part of his job. But to me, it felt like she was creeping into our marriage, one calculated step at a time. And then came the business trip. Eric had been nervous when he told me he had to travel for work. I could see it in the way he avoided eye contact, in the way his fingers tapped against the table as he spoke. But I hadn't thought much of it until I found out later that he had lied to me. He told me he was going alone. He wasn't. I was sitting on the couch when my phone buzzed. It was a message from an old friend, someone I hadn't spoken to in months. At first, I thought it was just a random check-in, but then I saw the picture attached to the message. It was Eric and Lena, together, entering a hotel room. My heart stopped. My fingers trembled as I read the message accompanying the photo. Angela, I don't know what's going on, but I saw your husband with this woman. I thought you should know. I stared at the picture for what felt like an eternity. My mind screamed at me to find a reasonable explanation, but my heart had already decided. He had betrayed me. I felt sick. All those nights of telling him I didn't like Lena, all those times I had begged him to set boundaries with her, it had all been for nothing. He had gone behind my back. He had lied. Something inside me broke that night. I couldn't sleep. I tossed and turned, replaying the image in my head over and over again. The picture of Eric and Lena disappearing into that hotel room haunted me, burned itself into my mind like a wound that refused to close. I could almost hear their laughter, imagine her hands on him, feel the betrayal creeping into my veins like poison. My chest tightened with every breath, my stomach twisted into knots. The man I had trusted, the man I had given everything to, had lied to me. And for what? For her? I wanted to scream. I wanted to throw something, to shatter the silence of our bedroom with my rage. But more than anything, I wanted him to feel what I was feeling. I wanted him to suffer the way I was suffering. I wanted him to know what it was like to be betrayed by the one person who was supposed to be loyal. That was when the idea first crept into my mind. If he could betray me, then I could do the same. The thought was small at first, like a whisper in the back of my mind, a passing idea, a flicker of temptation that I brushed away. But the more I thought about it, the more it grew, twisting itself around my pain, feeding off my anger, until it became something undeniable, something I wanted. Eric had been my world, my everything. I had sacrificed for him, loved him unconditionally, and he had thrown it away for Lena, for a woman who had been circling him like a vulture since the day she met him. Number. He didn't deserve my love. He deserved to feel this pain. He deserved to know what it felt like when the person you trusted most in the world shattered you. I reached for my phone. My hands were trembling as I scrolled through my messages, through the countless unread texts from a name I had long ignored. Daniel. Daniel had been my ex-boyfriend before Eric. He had loved me deeply, too deeply, in a way that had once felt suffocating. When we broke up, he had refused to let go, reaching out to me even after I moved on. I had ignored him, pushed him away, trying to build something new with Eric. But Daniel had never truly given up. Every few months, I would get a message from him. A simple, "Hey, how have you been?" Or, "I miss you." I had always ignored them, deleting them without a second thought. I had told myself it was for the best, that I had moved on. But now, I wanted him to keep trying. I wanted him to want me the way he had always wanted me. I wanted to feel desired, to feel like I still had power over someone. So, that night, with the image of Eric and Lena still burning in my mind, I did something I never thought I would do. I responded. At first, it was casual, a simple message back, as if I had just stumbled upon his texts and decided to reply. He was shocked. I could tell from the speed of his response. "Angela? Wow, I never thought I'd hear from you again." I could almost hear the excitement in his words, the way his heart must have pounded in his chest as he read my message. He had waited for this moment for so long. We started talking. At first, it was innocent, just catching up, just reminiscing. But I knew where it was heading. I could feel the shift in his words, the way he started to flirt, the way he tested the waters. And I let him. I let him say all the things I had once loved to hear. I let him remind me of the way he had always worshipped me. I let him make me feel wanted. It didn't take long for him to suggest meeting up. I hesitated just for a moment. Some part of me, the part that still loved Eric, the part that had spent years building a life with him, screamed at me to stop, to close the conversation, to put my phone down, to think about what I was doing. But then I saw the picture again, the one of Eric and Lena walking into that hotel room together. And just like that, the hesitation was gone. I agreed to meet him. The next evening, I found myself standing outside a dimly lit bar, my heart pounding in my chest. I wasn't sure if it was excitement or nerves, maybe both. When Daniel saw me, his eyes lit up in a way that sent a shiver down my spine. He looked at me like I was the most beautiful thing he had ever seen, like I was still his. We talked, we drank. The past felt closer than ever, wrapping itself around me like a familiar embrace. He made me laugh. He made me forget, if only for a little while. And then, when the night had stretched too long and the alcohol had blurred the sharp edges of my pain, we crossed a line I could never uncross. His hands felt different from Eric's. His lips were unfamiliar, his touch both foreign and familiar all at once. In the haze of my revenge, I convinced myself it was what I wanted, that it was justice, that it was fair. But as I lay beside him afterward, staring at the ceiling, I waited for the satisfaction to come. I had gotten my revenge. Eric had hurt me, and now I had hurt him back. But there was no satisfaction, only emptiness. Eric returned from his trip a few days later, carrying himself with the same ease he always had, as if nothing had changed. But for me, everything had changed. I couldn't look at him the same way. I couldn't hear his voice without imagining hers whispering in his ear. I couldn't watch him move around our home without picturing him walking into that hotel room with her. I was cold, distant. I moved through our house like a ghost, responding to his words with nods and empty hums. He noticed. Of course he did. But instead of pushing, he gave me space, waiting for me to thaw, waiting for the anger to fade. It didn't. At first, I thought maybe I could just live with it, carry the weight of my hurt in silence and let it eat at me from the inside. But every glance at him, every moment he touched me, made my skin crawl. The bitterness grew like a disease, festering, turning something inside me rotten. Then, one night, as we sat in silence over dinner, he finally spoke. I need to tell you something. His voice was quiet, hesitant. My grip on my fork tightened as I turned to him, my heart slamming against my ribs. Was this it? Was he about to confess? Was he about to say the words I had been bracing for? I stared at him, waiting, unwilling to make this easy for him. I didn't go on the trip alone, he admitted. The air seemed to thicken around me. My chest tightened. I felt like I was drowning. Lena was there too. Everything inside me stilled. My breath caught in my throat. My vision blurred at the edges. I had spent days convincing myself that he wouldn't admit it, that he would keep up the lie. But here he was, looking right at me, saying the words I already knew to be true. But he wasn't done. But nothing happened, he continued, his voice urgent, pleading. We had separate beds. I swear, Angela, I should have told you, but I knew you would be upset. I didn't want you to worry. I stared at him, feeling my world tilt beneath me. Nothing happened. Nothing happened. The words echoed in my head, bouncing off the walls of my mind, deafening me to everything else. He hadn't cheated. He had lied, yes, but he hadn't betrayed me. But I had betrayed him. A sudden rush of nausea hit me, and I had to grip the edge of the table to steady myself. My heart pounded so hard, I thought he might hear it. The room felt too small, the air too thick. Angela? He said softly, watching me, concern etched into every line of his face. Are you okay? Was I okay? I wanted to laugh. I wanted to scream. I wanted to tell him the truth, to wipe that concerned expression off his face with the same force that he had shattered me. But I couldn't. Not yet. So instead, I nodded stiffly, forcing words past the lump in my throat. I need some air. I pushed away from the table and walked out of the house, leaving Eric behind, oblivious to the storm raging inside me. The guilt consumed me. It gnawed at me every second of every day, whispering my sins in my ears, a relentless voice that refused to be silenced. Every moment felt like I was drowning in it, the weight pressing down on my chest, suffocating me. I couldn't eat. I couldn't sleep. My body rejected everything I tried to give it. Food, rest, peace, none of it belonged to me anymore. I had forfeited the right to it the moment I let my rage drive me into another man's arms. Every time Eric touched me, I flinched. Not because I feared him, but because I feared myself. His hands, once so familiar, felt foreign against my skin. I didn't deserve them. I didn't deserve his kindness, his love, his unwavering faith in me. I had betrayed him in the worst way, and it was killing me. I had to tell him. I had no choice. But how do you tell the man who loves you, the man who trusts you, that you destroyed everything because of a lie? How do you confess to tearing apart your marriage over a mistake? The words stayed lodged in my throat for days, choking me, refusing to come out. I rehearsed them in my mind over and over again, but every time I opened my mouth, nothing came. And then, one night, as Eric lay beside me, his breathing steady, his warmth radiating into me, I felt like I was being suffocated by my own silence. The room was dark, the air thick with something unspoken. I turned onto my side, staring at the ceiling, my heart beat a frantic drum in my chest. I took a deep breath and finally spoke the words that would shatter everything. "I need to confess something," I whispered, my voice barely audible. Eric stirred, turning to face me. Even in the dim glow of the moonlight filtering through the curtains, I could see the concern flickering in his eyes. "What is it?" he asked, his voice gentle, unsuspecting. I swallowed hard. My hands trembled against the sheets. I I slept with my ex. Silence. Complete and utter silence. It stretched between us, thick and suffocating. I could hear the faint sound of the clock ticking on the wall, each second dragging painfully. Eric didn't move. He didn't speak. He just lay there, staring at me, his expression unreadable. Then he sat up, slowly, deliberately. The bed shifted beneath us, the sudden distance between us colder than the air in the room. "What?" His voice was barely above a whisper. Tears burned my eyes. I wanted to reach for him, to touch him, but I knew I had lost that right. "I thought you cheated on me," I choked out. "I saw the picture. I thought you betrayed me, and I was so angry, so hurt. I wanted to hurt you back." His jaw clenched. His hands balled into fists against his thighs. He looked away, shaking his head. "So that's your excuse?" he asked, his voice laced with disbelief. "You thought I cheated, so you decided to do the same." I shook my head desperately. "No, it's not an excuse. It's not. I was wrong. I know I was wrong. I should have trusted you. I should have talked to you. I hate myself for it. Please, Eric." But he was already getting up. The mattress creaked under his weight as he swung his legs over the side of the bed and stood. He ran a hand through his hair, his breathing uneven, his shoulders rising and falling too fast. "You thought I cheated on you," he repeated, as if he was still trying to make sense of it, as if the words themselves were foreign. "So instead of talking to me, instead of asking me, you—" He stopped, exhaling sharply. He let out a bitter laugh, shaking his head. I scrambled out of bed, reaching for my phone. My hands trembled as I unlocked it, scrolling to the message that had started it all. I turned the screen toward him, showing him the picture my friend had sent, the picture of him and Lena entering the hotel room together. "This," I whispered, "this is why. I saw this, and I couldn't think straight. I felt betrayed. I felt like my world was crumbling." Eric took the phone from my hand, staring at the image. His face was unreadable, his eyes scanning the photo again and again. Then, after what felt like an eternity, he let out a slow breath and handed it back to me. "So, instead of talking to me," he said, his voice eerily calm, "you made the worst possible assumption and went straight to destroying our marriage." I opened my mouth, but I had no defense. No words could fix what I had done. Eric let out a shaky breath and looked away, as if he couldn't bear to look at me anymore. "I need to think," he muttered. Then he walked out of the bedroom, leaving me alone with my guilt. He didn't come home that night, or the night after that. The house felt emptier with each passing hour. The silence was deafening, an unbearable weight pressing down on me. Every creak of the floorboards, every distant hum of a car passing outside made my heart leap with false hope that maybe, just maybe, he was coming back. But he didn't. I called him again and again. My fingers trembled as I dialed his number, the same number I had memorized long before we were even married. But every call went unanswered. Every message I sent remained unread. I left voicemails, each one more desperate than the last, my voice cracking with sobs, my breath hitching as I begged him to talk to me, to come home, to just give me a chance to explain, to fix this. But the only response I received was silence. The first night, I convinced myself that he just needed time. He was angry, hurt. I understood that. He just needed space to cool off, to process everything. He would come back when he was ready. The second night, doubt started creeping in. What if he didn't just need time? What if he had already made up his mind? What if this was it? By the third day, my hope had started to wither. The realization that he might not come back hit me like a freight train. I wandered around the house like a ghost, haunted by memories of us. The scent of his cologne still lingered in the air, the imprint of his body still fresh on his pillow. Everything around me screamed of him, of us, of what we used to be. And then, on the fourth day, the front door finally opened. I had been curled up on the couch, my eyes swollen from crying, my heart pounding in my chest as I heard the key turn in the lock. I shot up, rushing toward the door, my breath hitching with relief. Eric. But the moment I saw his face, the relief turned to dread. His eyes were cold, distant, empty, as if whatever love had once been there had been drained away. He didn't look at me the way he used to. He didn't look at me like I was his wife, like I was someone he loved. He looked at me like I was a stranger. "I want a divorce," he said. The words hit me harder than I could have ever prepared for. I stumbled back slightly, my head shaking before I could even form words. "Eric, no, please," I choked out. "We can fix this. I love you." "No," he cut me off, his voice devoid of emotion. "You don't do this to someone you love." Tears blurred my vision. "I made a mistake. I know that. But we can get through this. Please, Eric, don't do this." He exhaled sharply, running a hand down his face. For a brief moment, I thought I saw something flicker in his expression. Pain, sorrow, hesitation. But then it was gone, replaced once again by that same cold, distant look. "This isn't something we can fix, Angela," he said. "You broke us." His words sliced through me like a blade, cutting deep into the marrow of my bones. I wanted to reach for him, to hold on to him, to make him understand that I wasn't ready to lose him. But as I took a step forward, he took a step back. He was already gone. And then, without another word, he turned and walked away. I stood there, frozen, as the door shut behind him, as the silence swallowed me whole, as the weight of what I had done came crashing down on me all over again. My knees buckled, and I collapsed onto the floor, my sobs breaking through the quiet. I buried my face in my hands, shaking, gasping, drowning in the pain of my own making. I had lost him, and I had no one to blame but myself.